Hello, everyone, and welcome to another series of IAVE webinar on decolonizing and repositioning volunteering for development. This is a webinar of series of 5 series, and the series that we are into now is the 3rd series. We have done 2 series previously, started with one and last year, December, and another, the 2nd series we did in April. And this series, we are looking at harnessing technology and reducing inequalities of research, expertise in volunteering between the Global South and the North. This is, like I said, a part 3 series, and we shall have part 4 in September. My name is Samuel Toure. I am the Regional Manager for IAVE Global Network for Volunteering Leadership in Africa. I am presiding over this webinar. Our moderator for this webinar is Dr. Lamiel Firi, an Executive Director for Zimbabwe Freedom from Hunger Campaign. Dr. Firi is currently the board chairperson of NANGO, National Association for Non-Governmental Organization, an umbrella body for non-governmental organization in Zimbabwe. He has been a member of IAVE since 1998 and holds different portfolios in local and international volunteer programs and initiatives. He has 40 years of experience in volunteering in and outside Africa. We are part of this webinar. We have exciting speakers that will take you through. But at the moment, I would hand over the leadership for the webinar to the moderator, Dr. Lamiel Firi. Dr. Lamiel, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Samuel, and thank you so much. Welcome, good people, to this very innovative and very exciting webinar. We have with us today is among our panelists, Rutherford Mwaruta is the National Coordinator, Committee for International Volunteer Services Service in Zimbabwe. We also have Marcelo Nonohei, who's the founder, MGN Managing Corporate Volunteer and Social Responsibility Impact Projects in Brazil. And then we have got my good friend, James O'Brien, the Executive Director of the International Forum for Volunteering and Development in Ireland. And then we have a research expert among us, Dr. Jacqueline, who is President and CEO of Centro de Investigation Estudios sobre Sociedad Civil, CIESC, and also a research chair of the Mexican Center for Philanthropy. Welcome to our panelists. So what I'll do is I'm going to start off with asking James to just introduce yourself and just share a little bit about yourself, and then I'll let Marcelo speak, then Dr. Jacqueline, and then we take it from there. Over to you, James.
Thanks so much, Lamiel. I'm happy to go first, but I think Rutherford is first up on the order of speakers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Lamiel, just on the program, I believe Rutherford is first up on the order of speakers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is Rutherford Mwaruta in, Samuel?
Yes, I'm in.
Oh, welcome, brother. Okay, it's your time now. Please introduce yourself and then you continue with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like also to request that someone Samuel or anyone should play my PowerPoint presentation, because I'm using my mobile phone. We don't have power here. So my name is Rutherford Mwaruta, representing Zimbabwe Workers Association, which is a youth volunteer organization here in Zimbabwe, but I'm also an EC member for the Coordinating Committee for International Volunteer Services. And I'm very much privileged to be talking to you today about how best we can actually harness and reduce inequalities within the new knowledge production of international volunteer services. So if someone can show up my slides, you can put the second slide. I think the most important thing when we talk about harnessing technology, I believe that we should harness the social capital first. We have a lot of human resources across Africa, across the world. So I think all these partner organizations which we have here, the multi-stakeholder approach. I think you can put the slide below with the multi-stakeholders approach. Can you go to the slide, the slide behind, where we have the multi-stakeholders approach? So with this multi-stakeholders approach, we have the African Union, the UNV, NVDA, CCIVS Forum. We have a lot of social capital. So if we put our resources together, we will be able now to harness the technology. I think the first point of departure should be the human capital. Once we have the human capital, it will be now doable to harness technology for the benefit of international voluntary services. So we have to take advantage of the human capital first before we harness the technology. And next slide, please. Thank you. I think what you also needed for this to work, when we need to leverage technology for a positive change. But I would like also to challenge researchers from Africa and also researchers from the rest of the developing of the global south, that we should also deconstruct our mindset. We should not set the standards. We should not set our standard based on the standard of the West. I think we need to deconstruct this Western perspective of new knowledge production. We need also, in doing so, we should also be able to scale up our research skills so that we'll be able to produce good quality research articles at the end of the day. And I think what I've seen based on my experience here in Africa have been, instead of complementing each other or supporting upcoming researchers, there's a tendency of competition. I think those with technology, those who have access to technology, they should also make it accessible to young people who would also want to contribute in the research. And I would also want to take this opportunity to challenge the African Union to take up the leadership and probably create a journal which focuses on international voluntary service in Africa, because they already have a platform within their systems. But in terms of the knowledge production, I think it's an area which is lacking. And they have the infrastructure as African Union to harness this technology for the benefit of the upcoming researchers. I think also, I also want to challenge our national government to invest on technology and create a very conducive environment, because in some African countries, it is very difficult to penetrate the research area because of the bylaws which are set by the government. And another thing which is also very important, if you want to harness this technology, is also in Africa, we need to lobby for price reduction for data, for the mobile data. Internet data is a bit expensive. And also we need also to lobby for the reduction of the gadgets for laptops and smartphones, because those are the gadgets which we need to do research. And I also want to ask, if possible, local institutions and research institutions also now to come in our respective home countries, and we work with them, because they already have the capacity, they already have the technology, these research institutions. But because we don't recognize voluntarism a lot in Africa, these universities are not taking us seriously. So I think we need to scale up our game and work with those institutions so that we'll be able to harness the technology which is already there in those institutions for the benefit of international voluntary services. Next slide, please. We cannot talk about new knowledge production without talking about the geopolitical imbalance within the knowledge production. I think the use of technology can actually reduce this global divide. We can take advantage that we now have technology. We can use it as a vehicle to change the narrative in the power structure of the new knowledge production for the benefit of the young people. I think internet has opened a lot of opportunities for more cross-continental research, and collaboration is now doable because of the internet. So I think we need to facilitate more cooperation between practitioners, academics, especially in the field of volunteering, so that we can continue the dialogue, so that at the end of the day, we can take advantage of the internet. And also, I would also want to argue that technology can be used as a tool to support cross-pollination and cross-fertilization of ideas. Right now, it's a very good example that we are using technology to link with someone in Mexico, someone in Europe, someone in Africa. So we can also do it when we are doing our research. But I would also want to challenge that, for example, in Africa, we need a regional platform which takes up the leadership to consolidate those very good ideas. Next slide, please. But I also want to highlight that if technology is not harnessed properly, it can actually widen up the gap between the global north and the global south. And also, I would also want to challenge, because in the new knowledge production in the field of development studies or voluntary service have been dominated by 5 English-speaking countries, namely the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. These countries have actually dominated the field of international development, especially on the knowledge, on the articles production because of the language. So, and there's an element of people whom I can refer as gatekeepers who control the whole research process. But I think those gatekeepers are not only found in these 5 English-speaking countries, but they're also found in other countries, mainly in Europe and the United States. But I think if we need to inform the gatekeepers that they need also to open up for upcoming researchers, so that at least research can be doable. And also, as Africans, we need to take the ownership and the initiative to penetrate those areas where we can do more research. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Are you there, Rutherford? Mr. Maruta, are you with us? Rutherford Maruta, please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I pressed it by mistake because I'm using a mobile phone and my laptop because I cannot see the words, they are very small. So I'm saying new knowledge production is rebalancing. We need to rebalance the new knowledge production by actually challenging the traditional ways of doing research. It has been everything, whatever we try to do is, even if you are going to conduct a research, you need to be, in order for it to be successful at a certain level, it should have some influence of Western perspective. But I think that's an area where we need to rebalance. And how can we do that? Please go to the next slide. I think we can do this through job shadowing. We have a lot of young people or young researchers here in Africa who can actually go to organizations which are actually doing well in research. Then they learn about the contemporary skills in using technology to do research. We need technological transfer. We also need skills transfers. We also need knowledge transfer. But above all, if possible, we should take advantage of technology to create regional hubs of competence centers, which can be used for new knowledge production. And I also want to challenge once more again that African Union Volunteer Platform should take up and should also provide leadership for this from these things. And also, we also need to decolonize the power structures in the research process by not measuring ourselves against the standard of the West. Next slide, please. And also shared best practice. Also, we need to level the playing field, which I think is not very level. And we also now want to raise awareness to the gatekeepers, like the traditional gatekeepers who also control this new knowledge production, so that they can be more inclusive when they do research. And also, we also need to now to harness the positive power which we all have. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maruta, for your eloquent presentation, and you have indeed raised some very important points. You started talking about the social capital, and then you spoke about leveraging technology for positive change. And then you also spoke about rebalancing new knowledge. And that's really is going to feed into the other three presentations. And then we will, when we have questions, let's list our questions, and then we'll ask them all at the same time. Right now, let me now hand over to our second speaker, who is Marcelo. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamiel. Can we go to the next slide, please? I want to start the conversation from the premise of the binary global north and global south. The lack of balance between these two parts of the world is well known and widespread, and not only restricted to the research scenario. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'm going to show you a map. Yes. This map shows, for example, the difference in publication of academic articles in the year 2016. The size of each country's areas has been changed to represent the volume of publications. It is evident that the disparity in scholarly publishing has strong parallels with the research in many areas, and volunteering is no different from that. Before getting into how we can harness technology and reduce inequalities in research expertise in volunteering, I'd like to reflect on this premise of the binary global north and global south, much in the essence of what Rutherford has spoken before me. So let's go to the next slide, please. I'm sorry, this slide should have an animation, so it's overwritten, but I'll guide you through my ideas here. So if you want to reduce the evident inequality, we must understand that this binary represents division, something that oversimplifies complex realities as if there were only two types of countries. The idea of two hemispheres also conveys a notion of a vertical flow of knowledge, technology, and power. And it turns out that if one party owns almost all the knowledge and the power and everything, what would be the direction of the transfer? It would be only in one direction, from north to south. And we know that's not entirely true, but the perception that there is not a two-path way only serves to reproduce power structures, some of which are the same forces that generate or have generated inequalities, the very inequalities that volunteering for development seeks to overcome. So let's go to the next slide, please. We must recognize that in the so-called global south, we have enormous challenges, such as lack of funding for research. We know that in our experience, sometimes we barely have the funding to implement volunteering projects and programs, and there is no funding left to research and to evaluation. Besides that, we must acknowledge that the cultural systems of volunteering, the culture of volunteering in Brazil, my country, is different from what happens in the United States of America, is different from what happens in many parts of Africa, India, and all over the place. So we sometimes the research framework comes from the north with no kind of adaptation. And we must acknowledge as well that in the south, we have power, oppression, and exploitation dynamics that are still the rule. And let's go to the next slide. The so-called global north has many opportunities to help overcome the challenges that we face in the south, of course. We have a solid track record of expertise in research and incredible human capital. We have funding available, and I think that we probably live in the best time ever to try to bridge this gap, because we have an agenda that expects individuals, organizations, private sector, NGOs from the North to really care and try to balance the knowledge and the situation that the disparities that we have from North to South. And of course, the North has the power structures and relevant decision-making centers to make it happen. So let's go to the next slide, please. If we want to decolonize research on volunteering, we must challenge and transform the historical power dynamics and imbalances that exists within the field. We have to reimagine and expand notions of knowledge and expertise. We need to challenge the dominant Western-centric knowledge systems that often shape research priorities and approaches. It involves recognizing and valuing diverse ways of knowing, including local knowledge systems and wisdom. We need to shift the power dynamics. This can be done by amplifying the voices, perspectives, and leadership of researchers working in their territories and fostering authentic partnerships based on mutual respect, trust, and shared decision-making. Rethinking methods and research approaches. Traditional methods often don't capture the complexities and the nuances of community-led initiatives. Decolonizing research requires developing more inclusive and culturally appropriate research frameworks that incorporate qualitative measures, central local volunteer voices, and reflect the broader social, cultural, and environmental impacts of volunteering. It involves challenging funding practices that perpetuate unequal power dynamics and resource allocation. This includes prioritizing long-term, flexible funding that supports systemic research, investing in capacity building initiatives with local researchers, and providing financial resources directly to community-led organizations to conduct their research. So for us to go there, we must consider some key elements to deconstruct traditional research approaches. So let's go to the next slide, please. When conducting research on volunteering through the colonial lens, it is essential to challenge and disrupt traditional research approaches that may replicate colonial power dynamics. Here are some key considerations. Co-creating research agendas. We must engage in collaborative and participatory process to develop research agendas, involve diverse stakeholders, including community members, grassroots organizations, and local volunteering leaders in shaping the research questions, the priorities, and methodologies. This ensures that research is driven by local perspectives and those directly involved in volunteering. We have to incorporate diverse knowledge systems, recognizing and incorporating diverse knowledge systems, including local ways of knowing, respect and value different ways of understanding and analyzing the volunteering phenomena, moving beyond solely Western-centric perspectives. This requires actively seeking and engaging with diverse scholars, community leaders, and knowledge holders throughout the research process. Building reciprocal relationships. We must develop reciprocal and meaningful relationships with the communities being studied. This involves cultivating trust, building long-term partnerships, and ensuring that the research process benefits communities involved. Engage in ongoing dialogue, listen to community perspectives, and prioritize their agency and self-determination. Reflexivity and positionality. Everyone should reflect on and acknowledge their own positionality and how it may shape the research process and findings. we recognize their own biases, privileges, and potential contributions to reproducing colonial power dynamics, engaging reflexive practice throughout the research journey, continually re-questioning and evaluating their assumptions and actions. Ethical considerations and informed consent. Prioritize ethical research practice that respect the rights and dignity of participants. Recognize the potential power imbalances between researchers in the North and in the South, as well as within participants of the research, and take steps to mitigate them. Dissemination and accessibility. We need to ensure that research findings are accessible and useful to communities being studied. Share research outputs in formats and languages that are accessible and relevant to these diverse audiences. Collaborate with community partners to disseminate findings in ways that are respectful, meaningful, and contribute to positive change. Reciprocity and knowledge sharing. We must aim for reciprocity in the research process by sharing research findings and knowledge with the communities involved. These can involve co-creating reports, organizing community feedback sessions, and providing opportunities for community members to participate in knowledge dissemination. Encourage dialogue and ongoing learning that contributes to capacity building and empowerment of communities. So these are some thoughts on how I understand that we can work together to bridge the enormous gap in research and volunteering. I think that we are in the best moment to make it happen, as humanity is much more sensitive to acknowledge that the sum of our unique capabilities can lead us to great achievements. And of course, we still have a long way to go. So let's all go together side by side. I want to thank IAVE for the invitation and all of you for listening. Looking forward for your questions. So the next slides, just want to thank and share my contacts here. Thank you all. Please, Lemuel.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you so much for your presentation. That is also to the point where you were really talking about the issues that we need to work on, supporting the previous speaker, the issue of balance, the issue of ensuring that we are all on the same page and that North and South need one another. So let us proceed. Please do write down your questions and we'll attend to them at the right time. Let me at this point ask James to come through and make his presentation. James, over to you.
Thanks so much, Lemuel, and thank you, IAVE, for the invitation to take part in this conversation. It's a really important one and a really timely one, and it's a pleasure to be here. I can't say I disagree with anything that's been said so far, and I'm going to do my best not to replicate what's been said so far, to bring something new to the conversation. But it's heartening to know that so far anyway, Rutherford and Marcelo and I are speaking very much from a similar place. So my name is James O'Brien. I work with a network called the International Forum for Volunteering in Development. If anyone is unfamiliar with us, we're a global network of organizations that work through volunteers to achieve sustainable development. And our work falls into three areas. We do convening, we do standards, and we do research. What that means is we coordinate research amongst our member organizations. We create spaces for practitioners and researchers to come together. And we also identify issues of collective interest amongst our members and the wider community. We commission research on those issues. If you could skip ahead, I think 2 slides, Samuel, that would be great. There's a little information on forum there. And over the course of the last year or so, if you could skip ahead again, Samuel, over the course of the last year or so, our conversations around research priorities have repeatedly surfaced this question around inequalities between global North and global South, if I can use those terms, as they pertain to volunteering research and evidence. So we commissioned this piece of research called Understanding Inequalities in Volunteer Research and Evidence to firstly help us to understand the phenomenon better, and secondly to identify strategic pathways for our members, for other organizations, for academics and researchers and others to address those imbalances in their own research. And we were very fortunate, if you could skip to the next slide, Samuel, to work with a wonderful team of leading researchers from the Global South on this, led by Helene Perold, and with Dr. Jackie Butcher, who'll be speaking a little bit later, and also Chris Miliora and Professor Jacob Matti. And the research questions that they developed, I think, were really on point and will form the basis of my presentation on the topic. If I could have the next slide, Samuel. And those were, firstly, well, a fairly basic question: why is there inequality in volunteering research? Secondly, what does that mean? How does that inequality in volunteering research manifest itself? And then thirdly, based on the findings of the first two questions, what concrete proposals can be made in which a range of actors in the volunteering research space can address inequality in volunteering research? I know some people are interested in research methodologies and approaches, so the next slide just sets out how this work was done. Firstly, through a literature review, the team split up different themes between them. Secondly, through key informant interviews with one international volunteer sending agency, 2 academics in Argentina and 1 in Japan, and a group of 3 representatives of volunteer involving organizations in Zimbabwe. And thirdly, then, by reviewing and drawing on relevant data from another project that we undertook last year called A New Dawn: Strategic Pathways for the Future of Volunteering in Development. And what that project looked at was the next 3 to 5 years. It looked to the future of volunteering in development, the challenges and opportunities, and supported our organizations in navigating those challenges and opportunities. And some of the data that was collected as part of that project touched on inequalities in research that was pulled into this report as well. So to get into the research questions and what we found, so at the moment, though the research is completed, we've had a lot of conversations about it, and we're going to be publishing it next month, so keep an eye out for it. So I'm just going to give some headline points on each of the 3 research questions that I mentioned earlier. If you could skip to the next slide, Samuel. So if you remember, the first question that we talked about is, why is there inequality in volunteering research? And I'm really just going to skim the surface on this one. The first point is that the inequalities between North and South around volunteering research are built on very deep geopolitical imbalances and structural issues and a legacy of colonialism. And those inequalities manifest themselves in hierarchies. Hierarchies around how certain knowledge and research is perceived, depending on how it was generated and where that knowledge comes from. And as I say, they're based on more deeper structural inequalities between global North and global South. And how those hierarchies manifest themselves is, first of all, a perception that the global North is the center and the global South is the periphery. And second of all, a perception that ideas and concepts from the global North are universal and can be universally applied, even in contexts where they aren't necessarily appropriate. And the second why then is around modalities, and it sort of layers on top of this. And there's an imbalance in volunteering in development research between international volunteering on the one hand, which is very well researched, and there's a very broad body of research on international volunteering, whereas other forms of volunteering, while equally important, are much less researched. And what the research found is that that's connected to the fact that international volunteering is associated with international aid, and as a result, it dominates the research space with very little research on other forms of volunteering. The third point about why there is inequality has to do with assumptions and discourses. And I mentioned assumptions there and universal assumptions. And there's a challenge around understandings of volunteering from the global North being applied to study volunteering practices in the global South, while ignoring contextual differences. And an example of this is that if you want to measure the extent or the impact of volunteering in a certain context, within Ireland, for example, there is a commonly understood definition of what volunteering is. But volunteering, even as a term or a concept, is understood very differently in different contexts. And if you ask people through a survey, for example, do you volunteer, or what type of volunteering activities do you engage in? That term volunteering will be understood very differently in different contexts. And in many places, volunteering is seen as something inherent or part of day-to-day helping activity within communities, rather than something additional that you do on top of your daily life. And there's an example in the survey of a household, in the report of a household survey in Mexico that was conducted quite cleverly, that rather than taking volunteering as an umbrella term, it divided it down into 30-odd different activities that make up volunteering, and in that way could be more universally understood or more applicable to the context that the research was carried out in. But that isn't always the case. Often certain assumptions and discourses and definitions from the global north are applied in a way thoughtlessly to research that's carried out in the global south. And if you could skip ahead, Samuel, there's a quote from one of the volunteer involving organization interviewees that says, "I think the inequalities were socially constructed during the colonization process. So it's an issue of structure and it's been reinforced by global organizations, which still acknowledge that Europe is the center and the rest of the world is the periphery." I think that's really powerful. And I'll move on to just say a few words about some of the other aspects of why. If you could skip ahead again to the next slide, please. And there are some very practical questions here as well. The first has been touched on around funding, that it is more challenging for organizations in low and middle income countries to access funding. That there was an example cited in the report around an organization that wanted to access EU funding but wasn't able to without going through a European organization. They weren't able to directly access that. And also a broader point that funders are rarely interested in investing in institution building, that they would rather work with well-established organizations or partners for research rather than investing in the capacity of partners that aren't as well established. Secondly, we found a gap in research skills and capacity in the global north. There are both well-established organizations and also well-established networks between volunteer involving organizations, universities, donors, and governments. And those types of networks are much less evenly distributed in the global south. And fundamentally, there is a small number of researchers who are available and equipped in the global south to work on topics in the field of volunteering and development. And then finally, I'll just skim over this, the idea of informal volunteering, which constitutes a huge proportion of all volunteer activity. For the sorts of reasons that I touched on earlier about definitions being applied universally, often informal volunteering gets missed and is not given its proper recognition within volunteering research. And I have another quote from the research on the next slide. And it comes back to that thing about definitions of volunteers, that if you ask people, have they ever volunteered, they discover as you dig deeper that they actually do engage in some form of volunteering. They recognize the activity more than the actual volunteer word. They recognize the activity, but give it a different connotation. And that speaks to the point I made earlier about the applicability or non-applicability of volunteering in certain contexts as a term. The second research question that they tackled was, what does this mean and what are the implications, and how does inequality in volunteering research manifest itself? And if you could move to the next slide, Samuel. I'll just keep going. So fundamentally, what it means is that the type of research that's being carried out and the type of way that it's being carried out currently doesn't provide us with a full picture of the reality of volunteering, that it privileges certain forms of volunteering over others and leaves us with gaps in our knowledge. And what's even more challenging is that we don't know where the gaps are. There are unknowns there. And there were two particular cases that are covered in the report. One around blended or hybrid approaches to volunteering that we're seeing amongst our members, what's described in the report as a sea change, but a very strong push towards designing programs that bring together different types of volunteers, so programs with international and national and online and corporate and youth and experience volunteers, taking advantage of the skills and experience of all of those. And it becomes very challenging to navigate that change and to move in that direction if our research privileges, for example, international volunteering over other types of volunteering, and that community volunteers, for example, are under-researched and under-recognized within the research. And the second example that's cited in the research, or the second point that's made around this, is that volunteering needs to be integrated more deliberately within different development sectors. So if we want to answer questions like what forms of volunteering are best placed to address questions of health inequality or address questions of primary education, it becomes very difficult to answer those questions without having a full picture of the volunteering landscape, and the current way that volunteering is done with the inequalities that are inherent in it just don't give us that picture. I don't know if you hear me, Samuel, but if you could skip ahead by 2 slides, that would be great. I just covered that. And the quote that we have here is from one of the VIO interviewees, which is reinforcing a very good point, that research isn't just for the sake of ticking boxes, it's for the sake of changing the situation. And all research should be done so that it can be applied. It becomes very difficult to apply research when it's carried out in a way that's sort of suffers from the type of inequalities that current research often suffers from. If you could skip ahead, Samuel, I'm conscious of the time, so to the next, and the next slide after that. And I just want to look ahead to solutions and how we address that. And that was a really important part of the report for us. And the first solution that was raised in the report is around building trust and building relationships, and to begin that, the importance of acknowledging that there is an issue here of inequality in research, and to recognize the value of volunteers and volunteering in multiple geographies, but also recognizing the value of research that comes from multiple geographies, and from there to build a truly global volunteering evidence-based through trust-based relationships. The second point is around multi-stakeholder approaches, and this has been touched on by both of the other speakers so far. And the important point, or the point that I would highlight here, is that multi-stakeholder approaches should include both approaching the design and the delivery of volunteering, that it's not just about research that's carried out in the Global South, or even worse, about extractive forms of research that just simply treat people and organizations in the Global South as subjects of research, that it's important in a true multi-stakeholder partnership for all partners to be actively involved in the design and the implementation of the research. And then finally on methods, that there is a need, the report found, to use a plurality, or use a much bigger range of research methods. I think through our own work with Forum, we find that many of our members stick with traditional tried and tested research methods, and are slow to embrace newer and more participatory forms of research. And what the report found is that we don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We don't need to abandon more traditional quantitative type methodologies, but that there is a world of more participatory research approaches out there that we as Forum and we as Forum members should begin to embrace, and that we should begin with open questions, that the research questions shouldn't be formulated in the Global North and then rolled out in the Global South, and that this inevitably involves ceding power and giving up power. It involves institutions in the Global North and researchers in the Global North giving up power over the design and the direction of research that they carry out, which may be uncomfortable but is essential. And if you could skip ahead, Samuel, to the next slide. And I'll finish with the final quote, which is from one of the interviewees from Volunteer Involving Organization in Zimbabwe, who may be on the panel, which was that if you approach these inequalities by acknowledging that they're there and we're motivated to work to change, I think we'll go a long way in helping all of us. And just finally, I'd say this report, we're very happy to share it when we publish it. It'll be available in English, French, and Spanish in July. And it's very much a starting point. In Irish, we say "tú smach Latin Hebrew." It means a good start is half the job. And the group of researchers have done a wonderful job in setting us on this path and unpacking the issues and providing us with pathways for the future. But it is only a starting point, and we're looking forward to continuing this conversation with you. So I'll hand back now to Lamia.
Thank you so much, James. Indeed, that research is an exciting research, and it is opening some new avenues and new thoughts, and we're really grateful that you were able to conduct that research. it gives us the basis even for this meeting that we're holding today. I want to thank the 65 participants that I engaged right now, and I encourage you to put your questions in the chat box so that the panelists will be able to respond to them. So Dr. Jackie, over to you. You are our last presenter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Listening to James, and I'm the expert because I've been at this for a long time. I've been doing research since I can, far as back as I can remember. I direct a research center which is affiliated to the Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is a very large private university in this country. And I was very happy to hear. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak a little bit about going a little bit beyond what James just told us, and very, very honored to be able to be on that little team that brought this research to forum. And so what I thought would be good is to share with you some of the research experiences and hopefully my research experience, and to see how this fits into international possibilities of research and how we can do things together, North and South. Can I have the next one, please? For the past 20 years, we've been doing knowledge and sorry, I have a grandson in here who just came in. He has to go to school. They live here. Anyway, for the past 20 years, we have been flowing and following and comparing changes in volunteer activity within Mexico. And as you can see, we've started in 2005, 2012, 2017, 2022. So this is our latest book that comes out called Generosidad en México, Generosity in Mexico. And what we've tried to study across is understanding what volunteering is all about and how people do it. And we put pictures of all the people that have participated with us throughout the years. And to coordinate this, we did this household survey, and it's taken us a long way, and I will go into it in a minute. Here in this survey, like James was saying a while ago, we could not ask the same questions that are asked in the North. So we had to ask questions in the southern way, which is, and James mentioned this as well. If you come and ask somebody, are you a volunteer in Mexico, in Peru, in Argentina, in Latin America, the word, just the word, is not understood the same as it is in the North. And so what you have to go is, well, and if you ask them, they'll say, no, I don't do that. But if you ask them, do you help in church? Oh, yes, I do that. Do you help with a soccer team in your where you live? Oh, sure, I do that. Do you help with prayers? Yes. Well, that's volunteering. So people don't recognize that what they're doing is following the international descriptions of volunteering. And I'll go into that as well. Can I have the next one, please? So what do we mean? We mean free will, non-remuneration, beyond family, and benefit to the community. This is a description of volunteering internationally. UN has done this description. We work very hard to boil it down to this, because this is what it is. It's an activity where you give of yourself, or you give to others in one way or the other. And so this is the basic description of what volunteering is all about, and all of you know this. So how are we generous? Our definitions, as I say, go into international ones, like the ones that we have from UN. And so they're very translatable into what the research can be done in any part of the world. Can I have the next one, please? So what have we been trying to do all these years? Measure the activity, see the difference between the flow, and if it grows, if there's more activity, less activity, more volunteers, less volunteers in our different countries. And here are the international studies that talked about it. The ILO manual for the measurement of volunteer work is one of the tools that we have used, and the descriptions are the same. Our survey, and I'll go into it a little bit further on, and also some countries have what we call satellite accounts. And there are only 12 in the world, so satellite accounts are good basis to get data from, but not everybody has one. So that's one thing that we can push our governments to go to their statistical agencies and ask, why don't we have a satellite account that could give us more information on the sector and on volunteering? So those are some of the things that we have to look at. This is what we did in Mexico, and it works. So our statistical agency pays for and gives us information on the whole sector. And so also on items on volunteering and what people do and how many there are as well. So this is important. It's important to measure volunteering. And I was hearing about the information, and I have the book here. It's called Perspectives on Volunteering, Voices from the South. And so what we did is get information from different parts of the world and academics to write about their experiences. And for example, if we talk to people in Africa, they say, well, remember the spirit of Ubuntu. And if we talk to people in Peru, they're going to talk about Aine, which is the whole spirit around giving and helping others. And we have to work with the local connotation of what this activity means. And that's important in all research. And so this is what we have been doing. Can I have the next one, please? Here's another example of, I've been part of several of these reports. They're available online. Anybody can look into them. They've done one 2018. They've kept on doing these. UN has kept on doing talking about volunteers and understanding how we do and how we act and and all this is part of interesting research of uniting Global and South. This is another reference of international possibilities that anybody can look into just through the internet when it works, right? Okay, the next one, please. The next slide, please. The International Labor Organization, we went to Geneva and spoke to them and said, look, we have to understand different ways of volunteering. And the 19th statisticians meeting decided that volunteer was work. And the volunteer work was something that had not been studied and not been, we hadn't gathered information on. And with other kinds of work that had not been considered, like, let's say, unpaid work within the home. That's another kind of work that has to be studied. So internationally, volunteer work is being recognized. And that brings a whole new world of academics and researchers into understanding how it is work. And we all know it's work because we all do it, but had not been considered before as work. And one of the ways to measure this is going into the labor surveys. That in every country there are labor surveys. Now, in some places they have a labor survey every month or every day. And that will tell us the status of people that are employed or people that are not employed. And in some countries, they maybe do it once or twice a year. But the suggestion of the International Labor Organization was to add questions, 5-10 questions, onto the labor surveys that the countries do, and on volunteering. And so, and add them on the way that we did our research, which is asking people what they do and not, do you understand the word volunteering? So the word volunteering is good for all of us, but we have to understand, like Pablo said, like Marcelo said a while ago, in different parts of the world, it's understood differently. And that has to be taken into consideration when we do research. So these are expensive, and these have to be done by countries. They have to be done by governments. The government has to tell the statistical agency, hey, please add these questions onto our labor survey. And that takes lobbying. So I commend most of you that will like to do that lobbying if those surveys those questions could be added on. And there's pilot programs, and some countries have done this. So there is a possibility of really knowing how many we are and exactly what we do in different countries, and in the North and in the South. The next one, please. Next slide. The next slide goes into basically the survey that I was talking about. And it goes into the definition and is called National Survey of Solidarity and Volunteer Action. If you can get them to the next one, that's it. Thank you. So here we go again. Often volunteering is understood within activities in certain groups, and this is why we have used the term solidarity participation or collaboration with others. Understood as help outside the family, no remuneration, and for the benefit of others. So the definition is there, the activity is different. So what did we do? And James said a little bit about this. We asked, we pictured 23 different activities, and we asked questions on each one of those. Do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And people would answer to that. And we measured these surveys, as you saw, we've done several of them. We've done 4 surveys, and they are now available at Cornell University and Roper, R-O-P-E-R. Roper is a public opinion repository of information. And we have asked them to put that on, to have this at the Cornell University, and anyone that has internet can access these surveys, the whole thing, all the data, the methodology, the questionnaires, everything. Of course, they're in Spanish. We'd have to translate them into English. But all the databases, which were the important things and expensive things that people need to work with, are in this repository. So I will write it down in the chat so people can access it and just look at and use the surveys and the databases. They're available to anyone that was interested in doing research with them. And so you see, here are all the different publications that we've done through the years in the center. And all of them are on our website, and our website will be, I also put that on the end. But we've studied episodic volunteering. We've studied volunteering in Mexico historically. We've looked at solidarity, and in these 4 books, generosity. Could you please give me the next one, please? Next slide. So what have we found? Well, we found lots of things across this. And in this questionnaire picks up formal and informal volunteering, because we asked them, have you ever done work in a group? And when you ask a person if you've been in a group, the person doesn't know if it's an official nonprofit organization, registered nonprofit organization. They work in groups, or does this group has a place for you to gather? Yes, it does. Well, that makes it more formal. So we really go into what people do and how they do it and where they do it. And what we found across the years is almost 70 million Mexicans over 15 years of age. And so that's important too. All the children are not counted in, and there are about 130 million Mexicans, where a lot of them are kids. So a lot of people do things in Mexico. They didn't realize they were volunteers. They didn't realize that they were doing this. We're talking about 74% of the Mexican population. And also we calculated the money the hours of these people volunteer. So what did we do? We took pieces of 8 hours that would be in one day of volunteer work and multiplied it by minimum wage for that day. And this is what we came up with. $72.5 billion is the network of volunteer activity. And so it only has a weight in time and effort of people. It also has a weight in money. And this is how much we are contributing to the country that we are working in. And so the next one, please. The next one shows the different kinds of activities. And look at the hours that we found out that people do. Now, if you also use time surveys, they can also give you an idea of what people do and how much time they use in doing it. So that's another research tool that anybody can use, because time surveys are done in most countries. Taking care of the disabled, helping in schools, giving advice. We also added a question because this was done in 2021. So we asked questions on COVID and the pandemic and how much giving advice during the COVID pandemic. A lot of people helped out, helping others that way. Environmental, childcare, community, unemployment, local community enhancement, cleaning and upkeep of temples. And a lot has to do with religion. It has to do with the way people view how they take the religion is another way that people participate very much. And this is so all over the world, not just in Mexico. So these are the kinds of activities that people do. And we also asked about frequency. How often do you do them? Do you do them once a week? Do you do them once a year? Do you do them twice a year? And so obviously, people that are volunteers in organizations do them 3 times a week, once a week. The people that just help in their communities to maybe put water in or carry the saint from one place to the other in churches. Maybe they have a group gathering once or twice a year and they participate in that. So we counted all of that with the frequency as well. I won't go into all the details of the research. Please give me the next one. So what I will go into now, just to give a few ideas, is the giving during the pandemic. What did we do? We gave money, but we also gave time. And we gave them to different things: meal services, food packages, financial services, protection of cultural areas, and obviously medicine, supplies, and housing. So Mexico, as in all over the world, did help out. And not only, we know how much money it was given because the government asks us when there's a disaster or something like this that happened to give the exact amount of money that foundations and individuals gave extra to what they always give. And so this is what happened during the pandemic. The next one, please. So what are the challenges? What are the challenges for civil society and for governments? To build up the knowledge, which is what we've been talking about this morning, diagnose and evaluate all expressions of solidarity, no matter how they come. So not with one lens, we have to widen our lens when we do our research. Incorporate into all levels of educational studies the importance of civic participation. So volunteers should be encouraged since you're a little kid to participate and take into account helping others. And then the next part would be also to encourage businesses and NGOs and nonprofits the incorporation of professional volunteer practices. How do we help volunteers grow and then make a lot of volunteers go from volunteering into the labor market. And so if they can work as a volunteer in an organization or in a business, they can go on from maybe taking that experience, the volunteer experience, and using it in the labor market. So these are some of the challenges I thought would be interesting for us to use as society, but knowledge building, we cannot make decisions if we don't create the knowledge. And this is what this research is all about, no matter where you are. So the next one is a thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And this little QR thing is for this latest book, which is online. And my assistant insisted, doctor, this has to be in there, but maybe somebody would be interested in getting the book. So anyway, there it is. It's in Spanish. And so that's one of the other barriers that as I was listening to the other speakers, that's another barrier, language. A lot of Latin America, and Marcelo would say, they're very good academics. We're not all connected. We're very good people that do a lot of good research. But then if you want to publish in a journal, it has to be in English. And you have to translate that. And so those are the important things that we have to think about when we do our research and helping in universities and in societies. How to do this is important. So thank you very much for listening. Wait, just a sec.
The timing was excellent. Thank you, Dr. Jacqueline, for the presentation. Beyond research, possibilities of living together, North and South. So once again, I would like to welcome the 63 participants that we have to this webinar, and would like to thank you for the questions that you are putting in the chat box. And I would like to thank the presenters for giving us the meat that we need to start chewing from now onwards. So just to summarize the key points that we raised, Rutherford concluded by looking at rebalancing new knowledge production. And these are the points that he raised: job shadowing, technological transfer, skills transfer, knowledge transfer, creation of a regional hub or competence center in the Global South, African Union volunteer linkage platform to provide leadership, and decolonize the power structure and power politics. He also mentioned the issue of shared best practices, level and even research fields, awareness raising with the gatekeepers about a more diverse and inclusive IVS, and finally he spoke about harnessing the positive energy. And then we heard from Marcelo, who concluded by looking at the points that can help in deconstructing traditional research approach. And he mentioned co-creating research agendas, incorporating diverse knowledge systems, building reciprocal relationships, reflexivity, and positionality, ethical considerations and informed consent, dissemination and accessibility, reciprocity, and knowledge sharing. And then James was giving feedback on the research that they've done. And the two slides that I would like to us to pay attention to. The first one is, how does inequality in volunteering research manifest? And he spoke of blended approach. Blended or hybrid volunteering models feature combinations of different volunteer modalities. It is hard to understand how these different forms of volunteering manifest and interact at different times and in varied contexts when there are gaps in our understanding of some modalities. He also looked at integrating volunteering. And then he said volunteering needs to be integrated more deliberately within different development sectors. He also mentioned our ability to answer questions like which volunteering approaches would best address specific development issues is undermined by multiple competing and inconsistent assumptions about what constitutes valuable research or knowledge. He continued to speak on that aspect. How do we change inequalities in volunteering research? And that slide, which is the third one, the next one from this one, talks about building trust. It talks about multi-stakeholder approach, and it talks about methods. And then finally, we just heard from Dr. Jacqueline, who spoke about the challenges of civil society and for governments. And she mentioned that to build up knowledge that will identify, diagnose, and evaluate all expressions of solidarity. And then she spoke of incorporate into all levels of educational studies and educational programs the importance of civic participation. And she concluded by encourage within businesses and NGOs the incorporation of personal volunteer practices. So this is a summary of the final points that were raised by our presenters. We have questions, panelists, which have been posted in the group. And I'm going to read those questions and would ask you to respond to any questions that you feel you would like to speak about. The first question came from someone who said, beyond the elements you give to deconstruct, it is important to think about religious forces and especially the poor. How do you plan to do it? Beyond the elements you give to deconstruct, it is important to think about religious forces and especially the poor. How do you plan to do it? And I'm just going to ask us to respond to that question, and then we move to the next one since there are different angles of the questions. So I'll start off with Marcelo, and then Dr. Jackie, James, and also Rutherford.
Okay, so I understand that what's behind this question is when you talk about researching volunteering is what kind of objectives we have in the research project. And just as James said, how can we apply the research findings to really change and transform the reality? So how can we improve volunteering and the impact, the social impact that we have, using the knowledge that is generated by research, and not only like having a research that only aims to produce knowledge and maybe to be published in an academic setting and not used to real transformation. So I understand that this question is bringing up the kind of thing that we need to have as researchers. We need to try to have something that is really applicable to the realities in each region, in each cultural setting. So I think that that's what I think that can be taken into account, the religious influencing on volunteering and looking after the people who is in vulnerable situations.
Thank you. Dr. Jacqueline? You need to unmute. Unmute yourself.
Yes, I will. I'm sorry. With children walking in, it's a little complicated sometimes.
I know.
Grandma, can you lend me your phone? I said, sure, no problem. It's deconstructing. Everything is easier said than done, you know. And to deconstruct, I think also as researchers, we have to be humble in the way and to understand what others are doing and to reach out onto others to understand what they're doing. When we did this book, the book of Perspectives on Volunteering, Voices from the South, we asked all over the world how so it's not just the global South in the sense of geography. It's also the South in the sense of being able to get to those resources. So to deconstruct this is going to be complicated, but it is worth the effort, because if we learn to understand the local realities, we can build up from there. We can see, okay, how do we do it here? This is what we understand. How does it relate to others? And you go from there, reaching out to other places. So it's a long journey, but I think it's worth it because we realize that we're the same, that we're doing the same things. We just have different languages and different ways of doing it, different ways of presenting it, and different ways of incorporating it as well. And as I said here, I'm asking the government to put into the school people civic participation. This is very important. They say they have it, but they really don't. So we have to go beyond our words and and really get into the action for this to happen. And if it does happen, it's because a lot of volunteers have pushed for this to happen.
Okay, James, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'm not. I may not be understanding the question fully, Albert, but there's something there about the gap between researching and doing, and it can often seem like we're very removed from the actual work that's happening, having these conversations about the nature and the direction of research. So I just come back to the point I made earlier about, I'm speaking from a particular perspective of organizations that doing and that want to learn from research to inform their practice. But I think the quote that came through from the research that all research needs to be practical and actionable, and that the purpose of research is to inform action, and that really what we're doing, we had a meeting last week where somebody said research is about finding stuff out that can help us to do things in a better way. I thought that put it quite nicely, that without losing sight of the bigger picture about the direction of research, I think it's really important to keep that connection between what we're thinking about and writing about and the actual work that's happening on the ground. And sometimes that can get lost. So hopefully I semi-understood, Albert, the question, but if not, then maybe you can chat in the box.
Thank you so much. Rutherford, do you have any comments before we move to the next question?
I'm sorry, Dr. Lamiel, Rutherford is a bit constrained technologically, so
Okay.
he's trying to get the call.
Okay, thank you. We have a question which says we need to leverage and empower on indigenous research models rather than the westernized models that are not translational and overly does not account for deeper native knowledge and experiences. This is a question that come, and to tie in with that one, there's a question which says North should listen more and give credit to African knowledge, allow Africans to be actors of their aspirations in terms of social progress. The feeling is collaboration is still in the North and perspective and interest. Why should the North define the parameters of research, framework, or technology patterns while we have already implemented a contextualized indigenous action, a research process and framework? And what are the opportunities for the North funding indigenous research processes in the South by the South using their existing frameworks? So those are related questions, and maybe we could have the answers. I'll start off with James and then Dr. Jacqueline, and then we proceed to Marcelo.
Yeah, loads there, and I think I touched on some of it. I think the point that came through in the report was that there is a whole world of other research methodologies that are maybe alien or uncomfortable to organizations like the ones that make up Forum, but that we should be more eager to embrace, and that we should be looking at more participatory approaches and ethnographies as well as the traditional approaches that we've used in the past, and that research approaches should be fit to the context in which the research is being carried out. I think that's a really important point to be made. In terms of what's valued, I suppose that's what I was trying to get at when I spoke about hierarchies, and that depending on where research comes from globally, or if it comes from a university, or if it comes from somebody with a PhD or not, that there is a sense that certain research is valued over others, and that research carried out in a certain way is valued more than others, and that the what came through to me as well in the report was that the closeness of research to the community in which it's carried out isn't valued highly enough, in a way that's undervalued, and in some cases the opposite is true. So I think that's another really important point. The idea of it being driven by the North, I think, is what I was trying to get at when I said not just, developed by the North and implemented in the South. And that does come with, that's uncomfortable, I think, for the organizations that currently hold power over the direction and the design and the implementation of research. And it involves giving up power. And one of the researchers said it also involves taking a step back and not coming to the research with a predefined question that's been developed in headquarters, but rather coming to the research with a much more open approach and saying, what's happening here? What type of volunteering is happening here? And to start the process much earlier in the communities where the research is being carried out, rather than parachuting yourself in with a question and a methodology and maybe even an idea of where you're going to get at the end of the project. So it's really uncomfortable, and it does involve people giving up power. And my hope with this paper, and I don't know if I said this to the researchers, is it's not just that organizations will have a better sense of what these inequalities are and what they can do about it, but also that people and organizations in the Global South can point to this and say, look, this is something that was commissioned by Forum, by you yourselves, and it says this, and this is the direction that we need to move in. So I'm hoping that it's not just a report and a piece of research, but also an advocacy tool for organizations in the Global South, and it'll be used in that way.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you entirely, James. The research is actually building the bridge to go into that direction. Dr. Jacqueline?
We're talking about collaboration, and thank you, James, of summing that up. I'm glad to see the report coming to life, And you know, we just did it yesterday, and it's now coming to life. And the collaboration that the people ask about, it's not easy. It's not easy for universities to even collaborate with NGOs. Universities live in their ivory towers, and they think that this is the way they do things is the right way, because it's a lot of hard work to get to where they are, and one has to acknowledge that universities are places where people have other kinds of skills. And to combine the skills of the NGOs and combine the skills of the universities and the people that work in universities and the people that work on the field, that's the difficult part. And so we have to reach across to each other to if you really want to know something about, you need to add on these different diverse methodologies, because the traditional ones are not going to work. So it also has to do with the attitude of the researcher, of us, as I said a while ago. We have to learn to be humble, to understand what's going on, because this is what creating knowledge on something that's real, something that's alive, something that we want to know about and report on, and not just write papers. So but we have to help this for this to happen. And universities need to open their doors to more of this kind of exchange of information, where this can be it can be beneficial for both sides, I think. And also on the funding. The funding is, if international organizations get the whisk of the importance of funding these kinds of collaborations, for example, even a forum asked us to do something on the inequality. Why don't we do something on reaching across, bridging those gaps? But we need the funding to do that as well. So everybody's working on the difficulty of getting funding for all these different kinds of projects. And that's not just in Africa, it's all over the world, having access to funds to be able to do this. International organizations, UN, they're on to their own thing, and sometimes they look at volunteering, as I showed you in the presentation. There is a lot done, a work that has been done on volunteering and international, and sometimes we don't take that into consideration. And that's also a work of a lot of researchers. So as people that do the work, we have to take from different sources and learn how to do that as researchers.
Thank you so much, Marcelo.
I think that we need to question ourselves, the way we do things, and see if continuing using business as usual is going to really to help us bridge those gaps. It would be easy for me being the South and criticizing, let's say, an international donor, which brings the funding for a project and a package of how we should research and evaluate the project. These funders should question themselves if that's the best way to do it. So going the way, just like, as James and Dr. Jacqueline said. And we as well should be questioning ourselves, because sometimes we have the opportunities to research and have funding, and in order not to get out of our comfort zone and being in a place where we can get criticized, we still go to the same methodologies and same frameworks, so we can be acknowledged as doing the right stuff in our in our donors, or maybe in our peers. So we should as well be questioning how to do things differently, and take every opportunity to try to decolonize the way that things happens, even when we have the power to take action and to make decisions.
Yeah, I think you raised some very important points. We need to be also looking inward as we look outward. Yes, Rutherford, is Rutherford back? Do you have any comments on the questions? Oh, he's not with us.
We have not been able to have Rutherford until now, so I think we just
okay.
proceed.
We have about what, 4 minutes to go, Sam?
Yes.
Okay, so I know there are so many questions that have been raised, but I would like to give the panelists a chance to say their final words and then hand over to Sam. So I will start with Dr. Jacqueline, and then James, and then we finish with Marcelo.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak about all the years of research that we've gone through, understanding how people really function. But that is the purpose of research, and we must remember that. And here I have a question: how do we bridge the gap between the North and the South when the people in the North are doing the reviewing, and maybe create our own journals where we are, and maybe look to our local journals and look into what we have locally. Sometimes we don't appreciate what we have locally, and there is a lot to look into and to take advantage of in our own regions. And that's something I was saying yesterday as well. I was very surprised when I was talking to researchers in Argentina. They didn't know what I was doing here in Mexico. And so we, in our own regions, we have to get together and talk together, and maybe as one, we can ask for more funding or look for different solutions. And again, thanks you for having me here.
Thank you. James?
It's been great to be part of this conversation and to hear from people from a range of different perspectives, and to find that we're very much on the same page is really heartening as well. I think there's it's a question whose time has come, and that there's a consensus and a momentum around it at the moment that we all have a responsibility to translate into action and change, and that'll be an exciting phase in all of this as well. If I can plug something that we're doing, we're also having a webinar based on the research on the 12th of September at 10 a.m. GMT. On that, you'll hear from the actual research team, which is a huge upgrade on me talking about the research from my perspective. So if anyone's interested in that, get in touch with me, and we're very happy to have you along to that as well. But plug is over, and I want to say thank you, Lamuel, and thank you, Samuel, sorry, Lamiel and Samuel, for bringing this together, and thanks to IAVE for hosting this conversation.
Thank you so much, James. Marcelo?
Okay, so I would just like to thank IAVE for the invitation and the opportunity for being part of this discussion. I'm very excited to see, just as Dr. Jacqueline said, that we are all feeling the same things, and maybe we are not talking to each other. So it's great to have this opportunity, and congratulate Forum and James for their research and contribution for the field. And of course, Lemuel, for your great conduction here, and Samuel for organizing everything. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to you, Sam. Sabel?
Thank you so much, first of all, to you. Come here. Can you hear me? Can you hear
now we
me?
can hear you. Now we can hear you. You were stuttering.
Oh, I see. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for being a good leader. You've done a great job for steering this end. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much for being a leader. Yes, thanks to all the presenters for giving us a knowledgeable document with us from the beginning to now. Thank you so much. I feel that we've got a heavy content here at the moment what we are using. this series continues in September, where we're going to part 4, and we shall communicate the next topic, where we're looking at what's some of the decolonization. And I feel we've addressed a lot, and we want to see how these resources can be useful to other actors across the world. So if you register for the webinars, you are going to receive the content presentations, and when we hope that you can use those contents meaningfully in your organizations, in your operations, to inform the topic that we are discussing today. So we shall come back to you in before September on our next topic, and we hope that you keep an eye for our email. I mean, we've gotten a good expertise in this conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Jacqueline, and then James, and Marcelo, and Rutherford, and to you, Dr. Lamiel. We hope that we'll have you in our subsequent webinars where your expertise is required again. Thank you. I appreciate all of you. So we keep in touch. Thanks to all those who connect from all around the world. Let's connect. Let's have the conversation going. If we have not been able to answer your question, please, you can send your questions to our email, and then we can be able to see which ones we can respond to, which one we can refer. But I definitely know that you all have made this webinar a great one. Thank you, and have a good day wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Thanks.